The question was spoken quietly, almost apologetically, but it landed like a punch to the chest. In the bright bakery filled with fresh frosting and laughter, one man's humble request carried the weight of exhaustion, love, and quiet desperation. He stood there with his shoulders slightly hunched, holding a few crumpled bills, unaware that just a few feet away, someone who had everything was about to hear something that would change both of their lives forever. Before we go any further, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The man's name was Michael Turner, a warehouse worker in Columbus, Ohio, and a single father to a 7-year-old girl named Grace. Life had not been gentle with him. 2 years earlier, his wife Rebecca had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving behind medical bills, unanswered questions, and a home that felt painfully quiet. Since then, Michael's world had narrowed to early mornings, long shifts, tired evenings, and the soft smile of his daughter that somehow made it all bearable. Grace was the kind of child who found joy in small things, who thanked her father for dinner even when it was just toast and eggs, and who spoke about her birthday for weeks as if it were the most magical day on earth. But magic costs money, and money was something Michael never seemed to have enough of. Rent, utilities, school supplies, and groceries swallowed his paycheck whole. When Grace's birthday arrived, he had counted every dollar twice, hoping there would be enough left for something special. In the end, all he had were those few bills in his hand and a knot in his stomach. Still, he walked into the bakery because he had promised her a cake, and he was determined to keep that promise somehow. The bakery smelled of sugar and warmth, a sharp contrast to the cold worry that clung to him. He had waited until the afternoon, knowing that sometimes unsold items were discounted at the end of the day. When he asked about an expired or leftover cake, his voice had been low, not wanting to draw attention. He was ready for rejection. He was used to it. What he didn't know was that another customer, standing near the counter, had paused the moment he heard those words. That man was Jonathan Reed, a self-made millionaire and the owner of several real estate developments across Ohio. Dressed simply, he could have passed for anyone else, but years of discipline and ambition had shaped him into someone used to control and success. He had walked into the bakery to pick up a dessert for a business dinner, his mind still busy with contracts and numbers. Yet something about that question cut through the noise of his thoughts. It wasn't just what was said, it was the quiet dignity behind it, the way Michael stood there asking for less than he deserved, all for the sake of his child. Jonathan watched as the cashier hesitated, explaining store policy, and he saw Michael nod, already accepting the disappointment before it fully arrived. In that moment, Jonathan was pulled back to a memory he rarely allowed himself to revisit. Years ago, before the money, before the recognition, he had been a boy raised by a struggling mother named Margaret in Dayton. He remembered her skipping meals so he could eat. Remembered birthdays celebrated with homemade cards and borrowed candles. He remembered love that didn't depend on wealth. Michael left the counter, his shoulders heavier than when he had entered, and stood near the door as if debating whether to walk out or try again. He thought about Grace waiting at home, sitting at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs and pretending not to be disappointed. He thought about how he would smile and tell her that birthdays were about being together, not about cake. It was true, but it still hurt. What Michael didn't see was Jonathan quietly speaking to the staff, his voice calm but firm, arranging something more than a purchase. Jonathan's heart had already decided long before his mind caught up. He asked about Michael, learned his name, and insisted on paying for more than just a cake. He watched through the glass as Michael finally turned back toward the counter, confusion crossing his face when the cashier called him over again. The cake Michael received was not expired. It was fresh, beautifully decorated, and far more than he had asked for. Along with it came a bag filled with pastries and a simple note attached to the box. Michael stood there frozen, overwhelmed by a kindness he hadn't expected and didn't fully understand. He left the bakery with tears blurring his vision, holding the box as if it were something fragile and sacred. That evening, Grace's laughter filled the apartment as she saw the cake, her eyes wide with wonder. For the first time in months, Michael felt something loosen in his chest. He didn't tell her everything. He didn't need to. The joy on her face was enough. But the story didn't end there. Jonathan couldn't shake the image of Michael's tired eyes or the quiet strength it took to ask for help. The next day he returned to the bakery, asked more questions, and eventually found a way to reach out. What began as a simple act of kindness grew into something deeper. Jonathan helped Michael find a better-paying job through one of his companies, offering flexible hours so he could be there for Grace. He covered the cost of night classes Michael had once dreamed of taking, but never could afford. Months passed, and life slowly changed. Michael stood taller. Grace grew more confident, her world expanding with new opportunities. And Jonathan, who had once measured success only in numbers, found himself measuring it instead in moments of genuine human connection. Just before we reach the end, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below with the words "Kindness still matters" if you believe small acts can change lives. Your words might inspire someone more than you realize. Years later, Michael would look back on that day in the bakery as the turning point of his life, not because of the cake, but because someone chose to listen. Someone chose to care. Jonathan, too, carried the moment with him, a reminder that true wealth was not what sat in his bank account, but what he was able to give without expecting anything in return. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and the quiet strength of everyday people, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps spread messages of hope to a world that desperately needs them. Sometimes, all it takes is hearing a simple question to change everything.